The streets of hunger. The night was cold, and the city lights of Xandor flickered like broken stars across the dark sky. Between tall alien towers and crowded markets, a small figure moved quietly. She was thin, weak, and her clothes were torn. She was just a girl, no older than 16, her skin pale with hunger, her eyes tired but still searching. Her name was Lyra. She was not noticed by anyone. To the others, she was invisible. Crowds of aliens walked past her without a second glance. Some pushed her aside, some called her useless, and others just ignored her completely. Her stomach growled loudly. She had not eaten in days. Every step felt heavy, but she kept moving because if she stopped, she would fall. She looked at the stalls of food in the market, bright colors, steaming dishes, the smell of roasted meat. Her mouth watered, but she knew she could not buy anything. She had no money, no family, and no hope. For a moment she stood still, watching a merchant place a fresh basket of bread on his table. The golden crust shone in the light, and the smell of warm bread filled her nose. Her hands shook. She wanted it so badly that her body leaned forward without her realizing. Then she made a mistake. She reached out and grabbed a piece of bread. "Thief!" the merchant shouted, his voice echoing through the market. Lyra's heart jumped. The crowd turned. She froze, the bread still in her hand. The merchant's face twisted with anger, and 2 alien guards rushed forward. One of them grabbed her wrist roughly, yanking the bread away. "You dare steal in this city?" the guard growled. "Filth like you should be thrown out into the waste." The crowd laughed. Some shook their heads, others spat in disgust. Lyra felt her chest tighten. She tried to speak, but her voice was weak. I was hungry," she whispered. The guard raised his arm, ready to strike her across the face. She closed her eyes, waiting for the pain, but the blow never came. A calm voice spoke behind her. "Enough. She is just a child." The guard stopped. The crowd turned. A man stepped forward, tall, wearing a simple apron, his hands rough from work. His face was human. Unlike the other aliens, his eyes carried no hate. They carried something else, pity, maybe even kindness. "She stole from the market," the merchant shouted. "She must be punished." The human chef looked at the merchant, then at the girl. "Punishment will not fill her stomach," he said softly. "Give the bread back to her. I will pay for it." The crowd murmured. A human defending an alien beggar? It was strange. Humans were rare in this city. Most aliens saw them as outsiders, weak and strange. Yet here he stood, unshaken, facing the angry crowd. The merchant frowned but said nothing when the chef placed coins on his table. The guard let go of Lyra's wrist, and she stumbled back, almost falling. Her eyes met the humans, and she could not understand why he had helped her. "Come," the chef said, his voice calm. "You should not be on the streets." Lyra hesitated. No one had ever spoken to her like that. No one had ever reached out a hand to her. She looked around. The crowd still stared at her with disgust. But this man, this stranger, was waiting. Slowly, she nodded. The chef led her away from the market, down a quiet street toward a small shop with a wooden sign. The smell of food drifted from inside, warm and rich. Lyra's stomach growled again, louder this time, and she blushed in shame. Inside, the shop was small but cozy. Pots hung from the walls, and the air was filled with the smell of spices she had never known. The human chef placed a loaf of bread and a bowl of soup on the table. "Eat," he said simply. Lyra stared at the food, afraid it was a trick. But the man only nodded. With trembling hands, she picked up the bread and took a bite. Tears filled her eyes. It was soft, warm, and real. She had forgotten what it felt like to taste food. For the first time in a long time, she felt human again. The chef watched her quietly. He did not ask questions, did not demand thanks. He only said, "No one should starve on the streets." Lyra looked at him, still chewing, and finally asked, Why did you help me?" The man gave a small smile. "Because someone once helped me when I was hungry too." Lyra's heart shook. She could not understand why a human, a stranger, would care when even her own people did not. But deep inside, something sparked. A small light of hope she thought was gone forever. Outside, the alien city still roared with noise, but inside this little kitchen, for the first time, she felt safe. And she wondered, maybe her story was not over yet. The kitchen of second chances. The warmth of the kitchen wrapped around Lyra like a blanket. She sat on the wooden bench, clutching the bowl of soup as if it might disappear if she let go. The human chef moved quietly around the small space, his hand steady as he stirred a pot and checked the fire beneath the stove. The glow of the flames reflected in his eyes. For the first time in many nights, Lyra felt her body relax. But her mind was restless. Why had this man helped her? What did he want from her? In the streets, no one gave kindness without expecting something in return. When she finished the soup, she placed the empty bowl on the table. Her hands trembled slightly. The chef noticed and spoke in his calm voice. "You have a name?" She hesitated, afraid to speak, but then whispered, "Lyra." The chef nodded. "I am Elias." Lyra repeated it softly. Elias. The name sounded strange but gentle, like the man himself. Elias did not ask her story, did not press her with questions. Instead, he placed a small cloth in her hands. "Wash these dishes," he said, pointing to the sink. "It will keep your hands busy." Lyra blinked in surprise. He was not throwing her out. He was giving her work. Her heart beat faster. Slowly, she carried the dishes to the sink and washed them. The water was warm, and though her arms shook from weakness, she worked with care. When Elias saw her, he gave a small nod of approval. Good. For a moment, a spark of pride lit her chest. She could still be useful. Days passed. Lyra stayed in the kitchen. She cleaned, carried wood for the fire, and washed dishes. Each night she was given a small meal and a corner to sleep in. It was more than she had dreamed of. But what surprised her most was that Elias never treated her like trash. He spoke to her as if she mattered. Still, the whispers of doubt never left her. What if he grew tired of her? What if the others in the city discovered she was working here? She knew aliens despised the weak, and she was weaker than most. One evening, as Elias cooked, the rich smell of roasted meat filled the kitchen. Lyra closed her eyes and inhaled deeply. She had never smelled food like this before. Something stirred in her senses. Something strange and sharp. She could almost taste the spice in the air, almost feel the layers of flavor. "Too much salt," she whispered without thinking. Elias turned, surprised. "What did you say?" Lyra gasped, covering her mouth. I'm sorry." But Elias did not look angry. He handed her a small spoon of broth. "Taste." She hesitated, then sipped. Her tongue burned with flavor. She closed her eyes, letting it spread through her senses. After a moment, she spoke softly. "It needs more herbs, something bitter, to balance the sweet." Elias raised an eyebrow. She was right. He added the herbs, stirred, and tasted again. A slow smile spread across his face. "You have a gift," he said simply. Lyra shook her head quickly. "No, I'm just—" "Yes," Elias interrupted. "You feel the food? Not many can." Her heart pounded. No one had ever said she had a gift. No one had ever believed she could be anything. But before she could answer, the front door creaked open. 3 aliens stepped inside, their faces cold and sharp. They were local officials, dressed in dark robes. Their eyes scanned the kitchen and landed on Lyra. "What is this?" one of them sneered. "A human chef and his pet beggar girl?" Lyra froze, fear choking her. Elias stepped in front of her. "She works here," he said firmly. "She is under my protection." The official laughed. "Protection, she is nothing. And you?" He looked Elias up and down, his voice dripping with scorn. "You are a human. You forget your place." The other officials smirked. "Be careful, chef. The council does not approve of mixing with street filth. If you keep her, your shop will be watched. Your license may vanish." They left with cruel laughter, their words heavy in the air. Lyra's hands shook. "I should go," she whispered. "I don't want to ruin you," but Elias placed a steady hand on her shoulder. "Listen to me, Lyra. They see weakness. I see potential. Do not let their words decide who you are." His voice was quiet, but it carried a strength that filled the room. For the first time, Lyra believed him. That night she lay awake on the small mat in the corner, staring at the ceiling. The fear of the officials echoed in her head, but stronger than that was the memory of Elias's words. Maybe she was not useless. Maybe she had something inside her, something waiting to be discovered. But outside the walls of that small kitchen, the city whispered with prejudice. Enemies were already stirring, and both Lyra and Elias would soon learn how dangerous kindness could be. Whispers of prejudice. The next morning, the streets of Xandor were alive with noise. Merchants shouted, machines hummed, and strange alien voices filled the air. But inside Elias's small kitchen, there was silence. Lyra scrubbed the floor with nervous hands, her thoughts heavy with the words of the officials. "If you keep her, your shop will be watched, your license may vanish." The warning played again and again in her mind. She knew what it meant. The council could destroy Elias's life just because he helped her. She bit her lip hard, fighting the guilt inside her. Elias, however, worked calmly at the stove. His movements were steady, his face unreadable. Finally he spoke. "Fear is like smoke, Lyra. It looks heavy, but it fades if you stand your ground." She looked up at him, confused. "But what if they close the shop? What if I ruin everything?" "You are not ruin," Elias said firmly. "You are a chance. Remember that." Lyra wanted to believe his words, but the city outside did not. That afternoon, the first customers came in. A group of aliens sat at the wooden tables, whispering to each other and throwing sharp looks at Lyra as she served water. "Is that the street rat?" one of them muttered loudly. "He keeps her here? Disgusting." "She will poison the food," another said, their voice full of laughter. Lyra's face burned. Her hands shook so badly she almost dropped the cups. She wanted to run back into the corner and hide. But Elias's voice echoed in her head. "You are a chance." She forced herself to keep walking, keep serving. When the food arrived, the customers poked at it, sneering. But then they took a bite. Their faces shifted from mockery to surprise. This is good," one admitted quietly. Another narrowed his eyes. "Did the girl touch this food?" "Yes," Elias said calmly, not looking up from the stove. "She has talent." The customers fell silent. They did not argue, but their whispers spread. Soon, the story of the alien beggar girl with strange cooking skills traveled across the market. Some mocked it, some doubted it, but others grew curious. Days later, the shop grew busier. People wanted to taste the strange new dishes. Lyra worked beside Elias, learning to mix spices, to balance sweet and bitter, to smell when the broth was ready without tasting it. She was still thin, still weak, but her eyes began to shine with purpose. Yet with every new customer, new enemies appeared. Rival chefs muttered in anger. "A human and a street girl cannot outshine us," they hissed. "This is an insult to our traditions." Some nights Lyra overheard them outside the shop. Harsh voices whispered in the dark. "They will regret this. The council will not allow it. She will drag him down with her." Lyra's chest tightened each time she heard those words. She wanted to be strong, but fear gnawed at her. What if they were right? One evening, when the shop was closing, Elias placed a plate of food on the table. It was her creation, something she had prepared without his guidance. She stared at it, nervously. "Serve it," Elias said. Her hands trembled as she carried it to a waiting customer, a wealthy merchant. He sniffed at the dish, his nose wrinkling. "Made by her?" he asked in disbelief. "Yes," Elias answered without hesitation. The merchant took a bite. His eyes widened. He chewed slowly, then leaned back in silence. Finally, he spoke. "This is unlike anything I have tasted. Who taught you this, girl?" Lyra swallowed hard. "He did," she whispered, glancing at Elias. "But I felt the flavor. I only followed it." The merchant chuckled softly. "A street rat with the tongue of a master? Impossible." Yet he finished the plate and left without complaint. But the next morning, something unexpected happened. A messenger arrived with a sealed letter marked with the crest of the ruling council. Elias opened it quietly, his face unreadable as he read the words. "What does it say?" Lyra asked, her voice shaking. Elias looked at her. "The council has heard of your cooking. They demand a demonstration at the grand feast." Lyra froze. "The grand feast?" "It is where rulers and lords gather," Elias explained. "Chefs from across the city compete to show their skill. It is dangerous, Lyra. If we fail, they will not just laugh at us, they will destroy us." Her hands turned cold. She had never stood before nobles, never been more than a shadow in the streets. Now they expected her to cook before them. Elias placed a steady hand on her shoulder. "You have a gift, and sometimes gifts are tested in fire." That night, as Lyra lay awake, fear and excitement warred inside her. The streets had once told her she was worthless. The officials had told her she was dangerous. Now the council demanded to see her. Her fate was no longer hidden in the shadows. It was about to be judged under the brightest lights of the empire. And, somewhere deep inside she knew, someone was already waiting for her to fail. The Feast of Truth. The day of the grand feast arrived. The city of Xandor shone brighter than usual. Flags of the council fluttered on the tall towers, and glowing lanterns lit the wide streets. Nobles and lords from many alien houses arrived in silver ships, their guards marching in perfect order. Inside, the grand hall, a long table stretched like a river of gold. The rulers sat in their high chairs, their eyes cold, their voices sharp as they judged every chef who dared present food before them. At the far corner of the hall, Lyra stood beside Elias. Her hands were shaking, and her heart raced so fast, she thought it would burst. She had never seen so much wealth, so much power in one place. The rulers' robes glittered with gems, and their stares were heavier than chains. Elias leaned close. "Breathe," he whispered. "Remember, food is not just taste, it is truth. Cook with that, and no lord can silence you." But Lyra's fear was heavy. She remembered the laughter of the merchants, the warnings of the officials, the whispers in the street that she was nothing. And now all those voices gathered here, waiting to see her fail. The announcer's voice echoed through the hall. Next, Elias of Terra, the human chef, and his assistant. A wave of murmurs spread. "A human? And that girl? Is that not the street rat? How dare they bring such filth here?" Lyra lowered her head, shame burning inside her. But Elias placed a steady hand on her shoulder. "Look at them," he whispered. "Do not bow. You have survived the streets. You have survived hunger. That is more strength than they will ever know." She lifted her head slowly. The hall still mocked her with cruel stares, but she did not look away. They were given one chance, one dish, one truth. Elias lit the fire while Lyra gathered the ingredients. Her hands still shook, but when she touched the spices, something inside her calmed. The scent spoke to her. The sharpness of salt, the sweetness of root powder, the bitterness of dried leaves. She closed her eyes and felt the flavors weaving together, calling her. She began to cook. The fire hissed, the pot bubbled, and the hall filled with an unfamiliar smell. Aliens shifted in their seats, their noses twitching. Some frowned, some leaned forward with curiosity. Finally, Lyra placed the dish on a silver tray. It was simple, but the colors glowed and the steam carried a harmony of scents. Elias carried it forward and placed it before the council. The head lord, his skin scaled with blue patterns, raised a brow. "A street girl's cooking? This is an insult." Then taste, Elias said firmly. The hall fell silent as the Lord lifted a spoon. Lyra's chest tightened. One bite could decide everything, her fate, Elias's shop, even their survival. The Lord tasted. For a moment, nothing moved. Then his eyes widened slightly. He took another spoonful, then another. Hall gasped. This, the Lord said slowly, his voice echoing, is unlike anything in Xandor. Sweetness, bitterness, heat, calm. It is balance. The rulers leaned forward, each demanding a taste. Soon, murmurs filled the hall. Words of disbelief. Words of awe. Impossible. From her? This flavor, it is new, it is alive. Lyra stood frozen, hardly believing her own eyes. The same people who would have spit on her days ago were now whispering in wonder. But not all voices were kind. At the edge of the hall, rival chefs watched with burning eyes. One hissed to another, "If she rises, we fall. This cannot stand." Shadows slipped from their group, disappearing into the back halls. Lyra did not see it, but something cold brushed her heart, as if danger was already moving closer. The head lord placed down his spoon. "Girl," he said, his voice heavy, "your hands are untrained, your face is nothing. Yet your cooking, it is a bridge between worlds, human and alien, bitter and sweet. This is not just food, it is unity." Gasps ran through the room. No one expected such words. But then the Lord's face grew dark. And unity is dangerous. The hall fell into silence again, heavier than before. Lyra's blood ran cold. For a moment she thought they would praise her, lift her from the dirt. But now she understood. The taste had moved them, yes, but it had also threatened them. Her dish had broken boundaries they did not want broken. Elias stepped forward, his voice calm but strong. "You asked for truth, and she gave it. If truth frightens you, then perhaps it is not the girl who is weak, but your power." The hall erupted in gasps and angry whispers. Lyra's heart hammered in her chest. Elias had challenged the rulers openly. The risk was deadly. The head lord's eyes narrowed. He leaned forward, his voice like steel. "Very well. If she is to stay in this city, let her prove her worth again. Not once, not twice, but always, and if she fails, both of you will pay the price." The threat hung heavy in the air. That night, as they walked back through the quiet streets, Lyra clutched Elias's arm. "They don't want us to succeed," she whispered. "They want us to fail." Elias looked at her, his face calm but his eyes sharp. "Then we will give them no failure. But be ready, Lyra. Someone out there already plots against us, and soon they will strike." The wind howled through the streets, carrying the echo of the feast, of praise mixed with warning. Lyra knew her life had changed forever, but whether for salvation or destruction she did not yet know. From hunger to hope, the night after the grand feast, the city of Xandor buzzed with whispers. Some called Lyra a miracle, others called her a danger. Some admired her talent, others cursed her name. Every corner of the market carried her story, the street girl who cooked before the council. But in the shadows, hatred burned hotter than the lights of the city. Rival chefs gathered in secret rooms, their voices sharp and venomous. "She humiliated us," one spat. "She broke our pride," said another. "We cannot let a beggar and a human rule our kitchens," the oldest hissed, and so they plotted, not with words but with fire. 2 nights later, when the moonlight fell pale across the narrow alleys, Lyra awoke to the smell of smoke. Her eyes flew open and her chest tightened. Flames danced across the wooden walls of the kitchen. The fire spread fast, greedy and loud. "Elias!" she cried out, her voice breaking. Elias burst from his small room, his face lit by firelight. He grabbed a bucket of water, throwing it against the flames, but it was no use. The fire was too strong, too deliberate. It was not an accident. "They said it," Lyra shouted, her throat choking with smoke. The kitchen, their only safe place, was turning to ash before her eyes. The place where she had found hope, the place that had given her back her dignity. It was all burning. Elias pulled her toward the door. But then Lyra stopped. On the counter, trays of food lay half-prepared for the morning customers. She remembered his words. Food is truth. If the food was destroyed, so was the truth they had worked for. I won't leave it, she whispered fiercely. Before Elias could stop her, she rushed back, covering her mouth with her arm. She grabbed the trays, coughing as smoke burned her eyes. Flames licked at her hair, heat pressed against her skin, but she did not stop. She carried the trays out with trembling hands, collapsing at the doorway. Elias pulled her up, wrapping a cloth around her shoulders. You fool, he whispered, his voice breaking. But his eyes were filled with pride. Together they stood in the street as neighbors gathered. The kitchen roared in flames until nothing remained but blackened beams and glowing ash. Word of the fire spread quickly. By dawn, the council summoned them again, not to test their food but to judge their fate. Inside the great hall, the lords looked down with cold stares. Your shop is gone, one said. Perhaps that is for the best. Without a kitchen, you are nothing, another sneered. Lyra's knees trembled. The weight of the hall pressed on her like iron chains. She thought of the hunger of her past, of the laughter that had followed her through the streets, of the guards who had nearly struck her down. For a moment, despair filled her heart again. But then she looked at Elias, calm, steady, unbroken even in loss. And she remembered the taste of the soup he first gave her, the warmth that had sparked hope in her starving body. That was the truth she carried. She stepped forward, her voice trembling but clear. You call me nothing, she said. But I was nothing once. I was hunger. I was dirt. And still I survived. Now I bring food not to please your power, but to remind you what it means to live. You can burn my kitchen, you can take my safety, but you cannot take this gift. It is mine, and it will live. The hall fell silent. Her words cut sharper than knives. The head lord leaned forward, his eyes narrowing. Then slowly he spoke. Courage in fire, truth in food. Perhaps we judged too quickly. He raised his hand, silencing the other lords. Lyra, from this day, you will not be a beggar. You will not be forgotten. By decree of this council, you are named head apprentice of Galactic cuisine. Your work will not be hidden in ashes, it will be known. Gasps filled the hall. Some lords argued, but the decree was final. Rival chefs burned with rage, but they could not challenge the order. Lyra's chest tightened with emotion. Tears slipped down her cheeks. She turned to Elias, who gave a rare smile. I told you, Lyra, you were never ruin. You were always a chance. That evening, as the sun set over the alien towers, Lyra stood on the balcony of the council kitchens. The city stretched before her, cold, harsh, unforgiving, but for the first time she did not see it as her enemy. She saw it as her future. The starving girl on the streets was gone. In her place stood someone new, someone who had walked through hunger, through fire, through hate, and found hope, and, as the stars lit the night sky, she whispered a promise to herself. I will never let another child feel the hunger I once felt. Not while I can cook. Not while I can give. Her story, once written in pain, now burned bright with purpose. From hunger, she had found hope, and hope would feed the galaxy.